Hey guys, Jim here. Right now we're going to be doing a second installment in a new series. It wasn't something that I had planned on becoming a series. We're going to be calling this Guest Blades. And the very first time I had done this was with my buddy Bob, who sent me a couple of knives just because he thought I needed to experience them. One of them was a Jeff Vandermeulen intro, and the other one, he totally ruined me and made me buy one. R.J. Martin Q36. So if you haven't already seen that video, please do go check it out. And again, it wasn't meant to be a segment, really. It was just something cool. I'd never done it before. Every other video I have is of knives that I personally own, that I've paid for, and I just decided to talk about them. And since then, I've talked to a number of collectors and even a couple of makers who have said, hey, I'd love to hear your spin on my knife. Can I send it to you? And I'm like, well, that's entirely up to you. You're taking an expensive knife and, you're shipping it, and God knows what's going to happen with the Postal Service. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. But if that's what you're comfortable with, you're offering me the chance to fondle and play with and then do a video on something that's really awesome that I can't get my hands on personally for one reason or another. So I had a wonderful conversation with a gentleman named Carlos. His YouTube channel is Fresno CP 1969. Please do go check out his channel. I will put a link down there in the description. So please do check the description. And we were talking one night, and he had put up a picture on Instagram where he had two very, very, very sought after knives. He has a pair. One that he left stock, which is sitting here, and one that he sent out to have a little bit of pimping done, just some anodization on some of the parts. And we got to talking, and I was trying to kind of get one from him and buy one from him, but with the prices that he paid, it put the price too excessive for what I wanted to spend, especially having not handled one of these personally. Now, you may be able to guess by the way I'm describing that what knife this is. This is the now, I hate to use the word legendary, maybe infamous, the now infamous Zero Tolerance ZT0777, or as most of us just call it, the 777. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding this. I will discuss some of that in detail, but I think it's more important to talk about the knife, its components, and the quality, to base all of the opinions that I'm going to have on this knife on its own merits without going into the debacle. We'll save that for later. So but before I talk about the knife, I do want to thank you, Carlos. You made a very, very generous offer to let me fondle this knife and let me do this video, and you've helped to inspire this whole segment. I've got another knife coming in that will arrive tomorrow. It's going to be, I've never had a chance to handle a GTC live and in person. I will get a chance to not only share that with you, but share a prototype with you. And I'll discuss that a little bit more in a little bit. I do want to say thanks to Brian Dunn, BK Dunn. For those of you guys that don't subscribe to his channel, go do it. You can see the knife. I know that he did a video on it. So anyway, so this is Guest Blade number 2, the 777. And before I get off into anything else, I just want to say that the action on this is every bit as good as $1,000 customs. It is truly remarkable. It flips open with authority. It flips open in a way that you wouldn't expect for its standard price point, or even honestly the secondary market price points. I'm telling you right now, it is every bit as good as a bodega. It is damn near as good as an R.J. Martin Q36. That is rather esteemed company when you're looking in G10, $850. Table price from RJ on this is $800. You're not going to get that. You're paying between $1,400 and $2,000. This sits somewhere in between the two. That is truly remarkable for a knife that Microtech had in, I'm sorry, haha, see, that debacle is popping up again. that Zero Tolerance had initially intended to release for $425. The actual release price is $475. You're not going to touch one for under $800, and even that, you should be tap dancing in the streets, because right now you're going to pay $1,000 to get your hands on one of the very few that people make available. So we'll talk about a few things here. First off, the blade is a 3 3/4 inch size. The top section, and by the way, just to let you guys know, I'm handling somebody else's knife. I'm not going to do anything like cut tests or anything else. And prior to coming out here, I have doused my hands in alcohol to eliminate any oils or anything whatsoever, because this is real Damascus and you don't want your oils getting into it. You can start helping the corrosion process. So I'm exceedingly careful when handling someone else's knife. So what you're looking at up here is Devin Thomas Herringbone Damascus that is truly a sight to behold. Now, the one thing, and I'm very much the same way, one thing that bothers a lot of collectors that use their knives, they tend to stay away from Damascus a lot, because you don't really want to use a Damascus blade because it's so pretty. You don't want to mar it up. It is, I don't want to say it's more delicate, but it does require more care than your standard steels. This was ZT's way of offering a beautiful Damascus in a completely user-friendly blade. They're using their composite process, which basically the two materials are fused together with the copper in between. This is an extraordinarily difficult and extraordinarily expensive way of manufacturing a blade. The second half of the blade is Vanax, or more appropriately in this case Vanax 35. We'll discuss that in a little bit. You're looking at 8.8 inches overall. So it's a fairly sizable knife. This is a pretty good size knife. Let's put it up against a couple of others very quickly, so I don't get dinged for not putting it up against a normal quote-unquote knife. There it is against a paramilitary 2. Here it is against a Spyderco Tough. Almost identical in size to the Spyderco Tough. And against a large Sebenza. And putting it butt to butt, it is considerably larger than a large Sebenza. So, you got a big knife here, but here's the big shocker about this. You want to guess how much this thing weighs? 4.5 ounces. Actually, 4.4 ounces to be precise. A knife of this size, what I would consider to be a full-sized EDC folder, at 4.5 ounces. I mean, this thing weighs almost nothing. It is fantastic in the hands. Your handles are 3D machined carbon fiber, and that's what's giving you that incredible weight reduction. They used a beautiful pattern of carbon fiber. This was not inexpensive. Really nice machining, 3D machining throughout. I'm not crazy about this part, but whatever. You have it on the opposing side to give you the cutout for the really nicely made pocket clip. Pocket clip is supposed to be titanium. The last I heard, it is titanium. Your sub-frame lock is titanium, adjustable with the steel insert. That is fully adjustable up and down, so in case you start getting premature wear at the lock face. That can be adjusted, and then it can also be replaced, and the entire sublock can be replaced as well. It feels amazing. Very, very cool. The reason why the action is so smooth, the pivot is actually going to be KVT bearings. That is Kershaw Velocity technology. And it's basically just a thrust bearing. It's a little blue washer with the bearings set inside. So it's not like IKBS. If you open up a knife with IKBS, you open it up, you have 20, 50, whatever bearings rolling all around your shop. Here, they're captured. So you can take your knife apart, do your servicing that you want to do, and they stay intact inside of that washer. It's a really, really nice system. Overall, I'm extraordinarily impressed by the build quality of this knife. This is as close as you're ever going to see a production knife make it into a custom category as far as the quality, the fit and finish, and the very, very exotic components. There's nothing cheap on this knife. I don't understand how they could go out at $475, to be perfectly honest with you. There are mid-tech knives that are not made to this degree of quality, fit and finish, or exotic components that you'll pay $600 for, $700, and maybe even more. All right, so now let's get to the blade steel, because this is what's really fascinating to me. Now, Devon Thomas Herringbone Damascus looks insanely beautiful. I love this huge groove. It really accentuates the lines of this uniquely shaped blade. But let's talk about the Van X for a little bit. What you've got is one of the absolute most corrosion-resistant steels that can be used for knife blades. And the reason for that is you're getting an excessively high chromium content. Believe it or not, 20% chromium. That's insane. You're also getting, in the manufacturing process, nitrogen replacing all of the carbon, or almost all of the carbon, and that's giving you an insane degree of hardness. So it's not prone to chipping. You've got a knife that you really could be hacking stuff with. It's a fine slicer. It does everything. It maintains an incredible edge, and you've got a toughness to it that's going to come very close to rivaling 3V. As a matter of fact, this is one of the most high-tech and expensive steels you can use. I mean, we're talking up there with S110V and things like that. I mean, it is a super steel. It Rockwells out to 57 to 59 Rockwell. And as far as talking about the Van X35 name, Bowler actually discontinued Van X75, so Van X35 is just now simply referred to as Van X. So you can just say Van X, and people are going to know what you're talking about. The quality of the steel means that you've got a blade that can handle anything that you throw at it. I mean, hard use and abuse. It's going to maintain its fine edge over a very long period of time, requiring, excuse me, further intervals between sharpenings, probably even stroppings. You're not going to have to worry about microchipping that edge. And it's actually very easy to grind and very easy to sharpen as well. So this is probably one of the most user-friendly steels that can be used. And it kind of does everything. You have a multi-purpose knife here. The lines on this are sexy and beautiful. The fit in the hand, I almost couldn't picture a more perfect fit, at least for my hand size. The jimping up here on the Damascus is adequate. It's not overly done. It's not harsh. But your thumb doesn't really want to slide across it. The flipper is the perfect size. It's just enough to give you a little bit of a hand guard there without being excessive sticking up out of the frame. As a matter of fact, this is one of the smallest flippers you're going to come across. They do a nice bit of jimping here, and it's a nice shape. It doesn't aggravate the pad of your finger. We all have flippers at some point that just, if you're flipping, it ends up irritating your finger. This thing, I could literally flip all day, and I want to. If I can get this close enough to the mic, you'll actually hear the bearings. Hold on one second here. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. That's super smooth. And delivered to me from Carlos without any excessive oil or lubrication coming out of it, so I'm assuming it's somewhat on the dry side. No issues. God, I could flip that thing all day long. Now let's talk about the conspiracy theories. Let's talk about the drama that has surrounded this knife. It is very clear that this design came first. Just there's no way around it. For those that don't know, Microtech released a knife. Initially, when they were showing it around at shows, it was just called Project X. Then when they named it, they called it the Matrix. It is as close to looking like this knife as you could possibly ever imagine without stamping ZT. And that's one of the things, friggin', they put billboards all over their friggin' knives. Way to take a beautiful knife and just overly do it. But hey, whatever, you got to brand your product, I suppose. So Microtech comes out with a knife called the Matrix. It is almost, and I mean almost 100% dead on, even the way that the sculpting has been done in the carbon fiber. The blade is the exact same shape. The groove is almost exactly the same. They have their own pivot, but it's almost even the same size. Slightly different hardware and placement for the hardware. Subframe lock, everything. It is... I hesitate to call it a knockoff because, listen, I'm sure Tony's already pissed off enough at me if he saw my Microtech DOC review that I did just a few nights ago. So, the way it seems to have come about on Microtech's end, that the Matrix was supposedly spawned from the whale shark, which was designed by Johnny Lau. Who knows? I don't want to get into all that. We do know, however, that the 777 was in-house designed by Kai, by Kershaw, by Zero Tolerance, and the designers were headed by Jim McNair. And Jim has actually made public posts and public references about this. He was very much a gentleman, in my opinion, but made it very clear. Our design was first, period. What came after that, that's on Microtech's shoulders. At some point, I don't care what you're designing, how long you've been designing, you're going to be influenced by others. And a lot of knife makers will even give credit to other knife makers going, you know what, it's a unique design, but I was certainly influenced on my blade shape or my bearing system or my flipper or my backspacer by so-and-so and so-and-so. It would, look at that pass-through design. Skeletonized titanium backspacer. It would be nice if Tony Marfione had just given the credit where credit was due, because listen, you can't make a knife that has that many similarities and not realize what you've done. Now, there's a controversy that goes in the opposite direction as well. There is a gentleman named Dimitri that several years, and I mean several years prior to this ever being released publicly, he made a knife that had kind of sort of similar lines, really not that close. You could definitely see them as being two different knives. But he had shown images on a Russian website, and they had been archived there for years before this was ever concepted, of the subframe lock. He called it something different. I apologize, I don't remember what it was called. And you might wonder, what makes this different? Why isn't this just like a regular frame lock that Chris Reeve invented and used on his Sebenza? Because this is not one material. You have carbon fiber for the entire frame, and then you have titanium that's attached to that that creates the frame lock. So it is a sub-frame lock. It is part of the frame, but a separate component, acting independently and can be independently replaced. And Dimitri had said, listen, I'm not trying to step on Kai's toes. I think they're phenomenal. They got great products. I'm not saying they ripped me off, but I have archived images with date stamps several years before this was ever shown to the public that I had done this, and I don't know of anybody else doing it before me. Now, there's some controversy that goes back and forth there. People claiming that as early as the year 2000, there were knives that had a subframe lock, whatever. It almost doesn't matter in the world of business who the first person is to come up with something. It's the first person to patent it. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I'm not faulting Zero Tolerance in any way. I think they do have a completely unique design here. If there was some influence, listen, you're a designer. You're going to gather influence from any number of things in your life. Maybe airplanes, maybe motorcycles, who knows? But at some point, you've seen a million knives because that's what you're into, if that's what you're designing. And you may have seen something 10 years ago. And it may, as you're sketching out 30 million designs for one knife, some of that in the back of your mind that you have no idea has spilled out into your own design. It's natural and it's going to happen. So that doesn't bother me very much. What I look at is the Microtech is a knockoff, in my personal opinion. There's no way around it. It came out after the images of this were publicly released. Thankfully, Blade Show in Atlanta, they recognized this knife in 2011, called it Blade Show Knife of the Year, overall Knife of the Year, and gave credit where credit was due. I have no real opinion of Tony Marfione. The experiences that have been relayed to me from others is that he is actually a super fantastic, nice guy. He has certainly had his share of controversies over many, many different things. Listen, whether he copied it or not, it's not my place to say. But it is a 98% replica. And that can't happen by accident, folks. There's also another little tidbit that was not publicly released. I was speaking with a very prolific knife maker friend of mine who we were talking about the delay, because this was announced almost 4 years ago that these were going to come out. Everybody, we all put in our pre-orders, we never saw them. And after almost 3 years of waiting, a lot of us gave up and just got tired of hearing all the BS stories about why it's not coming out there. So that's the basic story behind the knife. My personal opinions, I now must own one of these. Is it worth $1,000 that people are getting for them right now? Absolutely, and in every way. This is a $1,000 knife, flat out. Problem is, we know it's a $475 knife. I take issue, especially on a production knife, not a mid-tech, not a custom, that's different. On a production knife that I know is priced one way, I refuse to pay double to triple what that price is, just based on that principle. Because at some point, they can mass manufacture these. How pissed would I be if I paid $1,000 for this knife today, which I almost want to right now. And then in a year or two, there are 20,000 of these running around and everybody's got one in their hand that they paid under $500 for. That would bother me to a great degree. I don't have a problem with the fact that I tremendously overpaid over maker's price on my RJ Martin. Because you know what? There are not going to be a truckload of these out there. It's a hand-built product. Even if he wanted to produce 1 million, he could not physically do it. So there's no way I'm gonna lose out on that. That's a full-on production knife that if they decided to do so and flip the right switch, there could be 20,000 of these over the next couple of years. So I refuse to pay that much, just based on simple, basic value. Now you take that out of the equation and just look at the quality of knife based on the components, the sublime fit and finish. I mean, there is nothing out of place here.